do as a marathoner. He's only run the two races, and neither of them had particularly strong fields, and he won both. So perhaps this is the one he now feels confident with the distance, and this is the one when he's got to try and let it all go and see exactly what he is capable of.
Of course, his wife Lisa will be running in next week's New York Marathon, a race that Network 10 will also be covering.
She was a late withdrawal from this one, Bruce.
Yes, she came to Canberra and ran in the World Cup and didn't finish in the 10,000 metres, and has said that she wanted the extra week to recover. The field next week isn't as strong. Greta Bates is in the race, but Lisa would have a great chance of finishing in the place-getters there. Jones, I hope we can get a mile indication soon, because I'd just love to know exactly what he's still running these splits in. He doesn't appear, looking at him, to have slowed up a great deal. He certainly wouldn't have quickened.
It would be very significant, I think, if he's just dropped off even as much as 2 or 3 seconds a mile.
The one runner we haven't seen in the picture so far, Bruce, is Wolfgang Kruger of West Germany. His best time of 2:11:55. He finished third in the at Houston this year, but he won the half marathon here in Lane Cove in Sydney, which a lot of Sydney people would remember. At 38's the oldest man in the elite runners. But they all remember that performance in Sydney earlier this year.
Just been told, Dave, that the women are through the 14-mile mark in 2.5 minutes faster than they were last year. Motta ran 2:26 last year. So converting that, they're probably around 2:21 pace.
2:20, yep.
2:21, so they're certainly slowed up. It may turn into a battle. They'll give the world's best away and concentrate on who's going to win.
Well, I think once they surrender in their own minds and start to slow the pace, I think it then becomes a lot more probable that someone like Motta from the chasing group can actually pick them up. Once they settle into more thinking about who's going to win the race than actually concentrating on running it, that's when the danger period will come for the two leaders.
What's best for De Castella at this stage? Does he want that pack to be with him for as long as possible? He's virtually running on his own. He's 4 or 5 metres in front of the group.
I think at this stage, even at this stage, with probably 10 miles to run, for Rob, it's still he's running his own race now. I think he's alone as much as Jones is, because he's decided that he's got to keep that group going. 17 miles in about 1:20:38.
You mentioned the improvement there in the performance of the women at that point of the race last year. We just wonder, Bruce, just how far the improvement in times can go, because if we look at Rosa Motta's time last year of 2:26:01, that was 5 minutes and 10 seconds faster than her first marathon just 2 years before. So there was a 5-minute improvement in 2 years.
Of course, yeah, in the meantime, though, she had improved in the Olympic Games to 2:26:57, so it had been a gradual improvement. But you are right, 5 minutes in a race in 1 year is an enormous improvement, and if Motta can run around 2:23 this year, she'll be well satisfied. And if she does, she might still get into the finish. What's that?
Bruce, my quick mental calculations still have Jones on 4:45 mile rate, which will give him a finishing time of about 2:04:30. So perhaps he's slowed marginally. And as I said, I think at this stage of the race, any sign of a slowdown by Jones isn't a good sign. Obviously, he wasn't going to maintain that pace all the way through to the finish, but the further he could maintain it, the greater would be his winning chance, obviously. Once you start to slow down, the tendency is just to get slower and slower.
It's new territory for him also. I mean, he hasn't been beaten in a marathon that he's completed, but he's never done it like this. I mean, in London, he had Spedding and Hutton and a group for a long time. In Chicago, as we well know, he had a long group for a long time and then broke away. So, as tough as he is mentally, this is a real test for him.
Yeah, maybe too. I guess perhaps next year he's got a major championship race coming up, and he's yet to run a major championship marathon. Perhaps he sort of feels that Chicago Marathon 1985 is a good time to just test his own mental toughness by running this kind of a race.
I'll tell you what, the old steeplechase is going pretty well there too.
Ken Martin, yes, with the
very well.
Black shorts and the look like the Athletics West top on, or the red across with the white singlet. He's only about 5 or 6 metres behind Robert De Castella.
As we mentioned earlier, he's only run the 2 marathons at Sacramento and Pittsburgh with success on both occasions.
Yes, 2:11 and 23 in the first one, and then 2:12:57. But the Pittsburgh run was in poor conditions, Deke's just got... There was a clock there which would have said about 1:23, so it must have been a marker there for Deke Stella. It may have been the 17-mile mark, do you think?
It may have been.
I hope not, because it would mean they're a long way behind.
Well, it would still put them at about 1:20 behind. They were 1:30 behind at halfway, so that's a significant gain in the...
Is that 1:20 or 2:20?
1:20. Gee, my mental arithmetic's going to the pack, Bruce. Let's just ignore that one for a minute until we get a confirmation.
There's Kirk, 21. 28 is Gomez. There's Poli, the tall Italian with the longish hair. Now, on the left, you just can't quite see him in the black, is Jorgensen. Yes, they're telling us that the Mexican is Gomez, who, in fact, wasn't in the elite group that we were given. Rob Lejama still in that group. I don't think that could have been the 7
No,
mile
it couldn't
mark.
have been, because that would mean that they had lost another minute to Jones.
Well, it's a great performance by Mark Kerp, the American, in his first ever marathon. That was him in 21, just camped on Deke Stella's right shoulder. But there's the leader of the Chicago Marathon, Steve Jones.
And at the moment, Dave, if Jones can keep going, we're going to see a new world record. 2:7:12 is the time. And the women at, what are they, Leonard? They're just outside the world record at 25k.
25k.
1:22.59, about 4 seconds outside the record.
So they've gone from a situation early in the race of being miles inside of it. I think 2:15.55 was their fastest projected time. So they've dropped back to around about the world record pace. So the critical point for them in terms of the world record will be the next 5 kilometres. If they can hang on to the 2:21, then they may have a chance. But if they drop back another half a minute or so, then it'll be beyond their reach, I think.
I think at this stage they are starting to drop back. I can't really see them maintaining that pace through. Perhaps if Christensen challenges Benoit still has something left. The pace may pick up again, but in that sort of situation, as I said, once you start to slow down, it's very, very hard to pick up the pace again.
So Joan Benoit in 3 of the United States, leading the women's field. And behind her, and just behind her, is Ingrid Christensen of Norway, who in London this year set the fastest ever time for a female marathoner, 2:21.06.
No real gap has ever appeared between the two. If anything, I think Benoit has got 3 or 4 metres in front. It's been virtually the same all the way, with Christensen just sitting on her.
Very much so.
Both look comfortable, don't they? I mean, obviously they're running close to their maximum, but they both look very comfortable.
And our commentators back there as well.
I don't see any signs of distress in either woman yet. I think they're both still running strongly, although they are slowing a little.
We can assure the person who told us that was Salazar, the commentator, definitely isn't. It's not Alberto.
No, I'm still pumping for Don Carter. It may be a great trivia question in about 10 years' time. In fact, it's happened in a number of the major races. I think Frank Shorter's done the commentary on a couple of Greta Waits' world best times in the New York Marathon. Cardong, as I said, has done it. Of course, you've got to be a pretty good runner to run at that kind of pace and talk coherently anyway. We're having enough trouble just sitting here.
Jones has a big choice to make next year if he runs the major championships, either the Commonwealth Games or the European Championships. The whisper is at the moment that Jones will run in Europe, in Stuttgart, which I think is about 3 weeks after the Commonwealth Games, and Charlie Spedding will probably run the Commonwealth Games. Hugh Jones had that huge run the other day in Peking or Beijing when he ran 2:10.36, so the English and the British have got plenty of top marathoners at the moment. Now, let's have a look at this group. We've got Deke Stella, Poli, Martin. That's Rob Lejama on the right. He's looking very comfortable. Jorgensen still in the group. Kerp still in the group. Pacheco still in the group. No real Janika still in the group. So,
Doesn't seem to be any
Gomez.
change in that group yet.
18 miles, 1:25.30, and Len, that's well within inside the world record.
Yes, but I think more interestingly, it indicates that that mile was running 4:52, which I think would be slowest for the race. Now, there may have been a reason for that. Perhaps he's turned into the breeze or something, but without any other information to go on, that's...
Of the 1985 Chicago Marathon, Rob Deke Stella still leading the second group. And surprisingly, Bruce, in that group, they've stuck together. No one has really dropped off the pace in that one.
No, and they'll probably stay like that for a while, I think, Dave. They've been running for a long time, but we're still a little bit away from the business end of the race. Their hope is that Jones will slow considerably because they can't take 10 seconds a mile off him whilst he's running at 4:45 pace.
That's absolutely correct.
Somewhere along that, be running very well, doesn't he?
Somewhere along that straight stretch that we just saw Jones running along, I think we would have seen the 19-mile marker, but unfortunately it was obscured by spectators. So I think it's becoming fairly critical now what Jones' pace is.
Well, we've been told down the line that the group is 2.5 minutes behind him. So the interesting thing here is that Poley, Martin, Gomez and also De Castella have split that group up. There was a gap of 15 metres. When we come back to it, I've got a feeling that gap might have increased. Now, this is a brilliant race because not only do we have Jones in front and on world record pace by a long way, we have the two great women, Benoit and Christensen, running at 2:20 pace at the moment, and at the 17-mile mark. So they've still got 50 seconds up their sleeve in terms of the world record. And as interesting to me, anyway, is the fact that we've still got a great contest going on between the two of them.
Yeah, I think we're going to get a great race almost all the way to the finish from that situation there.
So this group here, Dave, it has split up a bit. Now, Rob Blaze quickly got onto the De Castella group, and I think Jorgensen might have gone off the back. You'd expect Pacheco and also Janica to go off the back of this group. Certainly Poley is right with De Castella. There's De Castella, Poley behind him. You can just see Rob Blaze behind him. Gomez still there, and I think Ken Martin might be in the group. I haven't seen Kurt. No, I haven't seen Kurt for a little while. Have you, Lynn?
It's strung out in single file. He was still in the group a little while ago when they were running more spread out across the road. It's a bit hard to pick at the moment.
But you can see there's a definite break there.
There is a break.
There.
There's Janicki at the back of the group we can see.
And also Gomez, but Jorgensen's gone off the back.
Definitely, yes.
So that group's gone from about 8 to 5.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, where that group was running is about the point where Steve Jones made his move last year.
If Jones can finish like he did last year, we've got a world record with no worries at all. We've got about a 2:4.
Yeah.
But I'm certain he's not going to run his last 6 miles as quickly as he ran them last year, but he won't have to at this stage.
No, he just has to maintain as best he can, which has always been his race from the start. He must have known at that pace that there would come a time over the last stages of the race when he'd be very tired, and that's what it would be all about, just maintaining as best he can to the finish, and I think that's what he's doing now.
There's Poley sitting right on the heels of Rob De Castella.
Poley's best time, Dave, 2:11.05, so it's a territory that he hasn't been in. And we go back to Benoit and Christensen, remembering they're on 2:20.12 projected pace at the moment. No sign of Motta or Doré. They've obviously decided not to run at this pace or even get near these girls at this stage, and their hope would be that they can both come back to them.
Of course, and of course Doré ran the European Cup on September the 15th in Rome, which was a marathon in fairly warm conditions, although she ran 2:30, which is a good deal slower than her best time of 2:26. I was a little surprised to see her in the field for the Chicago race, particularly given that she'd also run the World Cup marathon in April. So that's a third marathon in virtually six months, and the last two only a few weeks apart.
So here's this remarkable Welshman, and he's really feeling it. You can just see the stress on his face at the moment. He's gone out at what looked to be a suicidal pace early. He'd gone through the half in 61.46, and now Dave, he's just got to try and hang on and hold his concentration. And if he can run his last 8 miles at around 4:50, 4:55, then he's going to win this race.
I think if he can run it at 5s, he's got to go very close to winning it. But it's a matter of concentration and form at this stage. And this is where the concentration gets so hard from having gone so early in the race. He must have been concentrating fiercely from very early in the race, because all he's had to think about that whole time is his own pace.
Is that a 20-mile mark?
That's the 20-mile mark, I think, 1:35.
So we'll get an idea of exactly what rate he's on. It looked to be the 20-mile mark. There's De Castella. Now, Robley looks to be right on his shoulder. He's from Djibouti. Of course, 8th in the Olympics and 3rd in the Great Hiroshima Marathon this year. And Poley is with him. Robley's in the Olympic race and also in the race in Hiroshima. He had a bad patch between 30 and 35 kilometres, so that might be critical for him here.
Yes, in both those races he lost contact a little bit and then finished on fairly strongly, as strongly as the runners that he dropped off. And that's not a good sign, I guess, for him. There's our 20-mile split, so 1:35.22. He's still on a projected time of 2:05, as we can see, but he's run those last 2 miles in 9:50, so that's still 4:55 pace. So he's slowing, but it's not a critical slowdown yet.
Those two girls also, Bruce, still well inside the projected time for a new world record.
It's I'm getting a great buzz out of this. I hope the people that are watching at home are. At the moment, he's got to blow up pretty badly to run slower than his 2:8.05, which is his best. He's got to lose a lot of time in the last 6 miles, doesn't he? You're looking at about 30 seconds a mile.
Yep, that's right.
That's a big blow-up.
He ran the second 10 miles about just over a minute slower than the first 10.
Is this a break by Benoit, do you think?
It looks like it. Certainly, Christensen's moved to the head of that group of men in an effort to try and follow her, and she looks like she is.
She's closing it, yes.
Closing the gap.
That's as big a gap as Benoit's ever had. No, Christensen is closing, so Benoit, I think, might have had a little tickle there and a little try.
Yep, she certainly has. Christensen, again, she's not the best looking of runners, so it's hard to tell whether she's struggling.
So that's where Steve Jones is at the moment, in Racine Avenue, heading north. And then they sweep into Montrose Avenue before they come down. The finishing, of course, is at Lincoln Park.
You must think Chicago's the most painful place in the world, I think, Jones. I don't think you'd be taking in the scenery very much at this stage. So Benoit and Christensen have got away from the men again, so they've maintained that around the 2:19 pace.
Yeah, that's right. Benoit's, in fact, their projected time there was about 15 seconds faster than it was the last time we saw it a couple of miles back. So that would indicate there has been an attempt by Benoit to break away.
In that aerial shot there, we saw Wrigley Field, which is the home of the Cubs in Chicago, and now his.
Well, Poley's gone, Dave, which is interesting. So it's only Roblay and Rob de Castella. And when we looked at the pedigrees before the race, these were the 3 guys that you looked at: De Castella, Roblay and Jones. So Poley's gone off the group.
I think there's runners not too far behind these blokes, or was that Deke's heels I could see flicking into the picture?
No, I've got a feeling that they're clear of the others. But
they may be.
We might get an idea in a moment, but Poley's certainly not as close as he was, and neither's Martin.
No, there does seem to be some gap, doesn't there?
Well, as they're running at the moment, Bruce, it's virtually in order of their personal best times. Steve Jones, of course, 2:08.05. Second place, De Castella at 2:08.18. And, of course, Roblay, 2:08.26. So wearing the 1, 2, 3 singlets.
Yeah, of course, De Castella could be going for a big personal best here.
That's right, both these runners, in fact.
What do you think they're looking at the moment? 2:07.5, something like that?
Something
2:07?
like that, yeah. I think at this stage they're probably trying to look at Jones, and they're keen everything they can do running at Jones. I guess Rob might even be thinking that he let Jones get away a little easily last year, and has he done it again?
Roblay's a relaxed type of runner. The strange thing with him in the World Cup was how good he looked at the end of the race, yet he allowed Sala and also Nakayama to get away from him.
Yes, watching the race, his demeanour and his composure didn't seem to alter at all from the time that he was on them to the time that he was dropped off and then to the time that he finished. He seemed to be running in exactly the same manner. The only evidence that he was in fact falling off and then catching up again was the fact that we could see the gap opening up and then closing.
Running for almost an hour and 40 minutes, so Jones is looking at probably having about 25 minutes to run if he can keep going. So he's getting into the what you might call the downhill part for him. And Deeks and also Roblay some minute and a half, 2 minutes behind. We're just not sure exactly at this stage how far they're behind, but they certainly haven't closed.
No, I discount that 2.5 minutes. I find it impossible to envisage that they dropped another minute from the halfway.
There's a 21 mile
mark.
21 miles in about 1:40.25. So that mile pace is just over 5 minutes a mile, which is starting to look like a significant slowdown. A couple of miles ago, it was 4:52.
This is interesting, Dave and Len. This is the biggest gap we've seen. It's not insurmountable, but it's 10-15 metres.
And the strain is starting to show on Christensen.
So there has a small gap has opened up there.
Yes, in fact, in this shot, which is a little bit closer to ground level, it looks to be every bit of 10 or 15 metres. Christensen is throwing her head around a little bit more than she was. tough runner, though. I don't think she's going to surrender too easily.
Well, Jones is looking at this stage at about a 2:05.01.
And Benoit's looking around 2:20. So we just might be seeing the most remarkable marathon
Of all time.
when we combine both the male and female sections.
Benoit looks very strong, doesn't she?
She's an amazing athlete.
That gap is widening, Bruce.
Yeah, she's got this incredible marathon record. Christensen has run so very, very fast in London twice. She hasn't really won a major championship. Actually, she's really dug in here and she's decided to have a crack and try and get onto Benoit's back again, and the gap did close a little.
I think at this stage that's exactly what she has to do. You just can't allow a gap to open up.
Talking about Benoit's record in marathons, it really is an incredible one. 12 marathons and 7 wins, 2 times winner at Boston. But Christensen, obviously realising, as Len said, she won't let her get away from her, and that 10 or 15 metre gap, I think, is already closed.
I think Jarmer's he's getting away from De Castella here a bit.
Well, Rob slowed and took a drink there, so perhaps it's only the effect of the drink stop. But I think let's wait for a little bit longer and see what happens as they move on.
Have a look at this is the look at the course to North Avenue.
Well, they've well and truly gone right through this area. We're now coming around towards the 13-mile mark. You can see the markings there. And Jones well and truly through this area at the moment. He's currently approaching the 22-mile mark, which is actually in Clark Street. You'll see that come up in a moment. And then they swing right into Montrose Avenue. And there we see Wrigley Field, the home of the Chicago Cubs. We'll take a break here on Network 10 as we resume our coverage. The leader, the man in picture, Steve Jones of Wales. Very sizable gap on Rob De Castella.
Yes, and we saw when Rob took the drink some half a mile away ago that Robley had pinched a bit of a break on him, and obviously Deeks is going through a patch where he's finding it hard to hang on. Robley's probably accelerated here then because he looked very comfortable. He keeps looking back for Deeks. If he looks in front, he might see Jones.
That's right, yes. He must come into sight fairly soon, we would think. I just had a look at Jones's last 3 miles. They went 4:52, 4:55, 5:03. So he's definitely slowing down, but it's a question of how much he can hang on and how much Robley can pick up. And then, you know, when he gets the incentive, if he does get him in sight, that gap will close very, very quickly. He's got to get there.
Showing there, but still running strongly, isn't he, Bruce?
This has been a great battle because I thought Christensen some 5 minutes ago was in all sorts of trouble as we go back to Jones, but she and Benoit are still having this enormous struggle. You can see De Castella some 40 or 50 metres behind Robley. Now, the rest of the group is well and truly gone. They're way back.
They're not inside at all.
So it's going to be tough for De Castella now. He's got a great chance of running a personal best if he can hang on to his pace, but he's left on his own, and he's obviously... Robley's put a pretty big space in him then and not very much time, which is not all that good.
It's amazing to think that these two runners are running... Robley's probably running around 2:07 pace. Rob's probably running about half a minute slower than that, and they're not yet in contention to win this race. It's just an indication of how well Jones has run, how bravely Jones has run.
So we've just been told that Jones's 22nd mile was at 5:07, so again, he slowed up by 4 seconds. Is that getting critical for him, 5:07?
Without knowing the exact gap back to Robley, it's hard to tell, but certainly he's just continued that slowdown of a couple of seconds a mile, which indicates he'll be back by the finish of the race to maybe 5:15 mile pace. And if Robley's maintained the pace that he was running at early, which was probably just under 4:55 mile pace, that means he'll be close to picking up 15 to 20 seconds a mile on Jones.
We're in constant touch with Chicago, so what we're going to try and find out right now is just how far Robley is behind Jones. That's going to give us an idea whether or not Robley has any chance of, in fact, picking Jones up. It's impossible to tell looking at them from here. I mean, Robley looks very comfortable. That's the way he runs. Jones is looking a little more strained, but there's a 22-mile mark for Robley. And again, this gap opens up with Benoit and Christensen. And maybe Ingrid's played a last hand in the battle for winning.
If that was the 22-mile mark, it makes Robley down around about 2 minutes.
The interesting thing, Bruce, we haven't seen Rosa Motta chasing a hat-trick of wins in the Chicago Marathon. We have not sighted her in the entire race.
Well, we didn't see Lisa Martin last year until about 50 metres from the finish, so maybe it'll be similar for Rosa this year. Robles is based mainly in France with also Ahmed Salah, who's running in New York next week. He won the World Cup this year, the race that Robles ran third in. They run quite a bit in France.
Yes, they do. Many of the African runners spend time in Italy, France. The Ethiopians do a lot of their training in the sports camps in the Soviet Union.
Well, Robles, of course, finished third in Hiroshima in the World Cup. But we all remember him, Bruce, from the Olympic Games. He finished in 8th place, which was creditable. He was only about, what, 30 seconds behind Rob de Castella, who finished 5th.
It was an enormous improvement because just the year before he'd finished 47th in the race that Rob won, the World Championship. So he went from and also ran in the elite company to somebody who was right up there with him. He just missed that split for Benoit, but the gap's significant now.
Significant now. I would say at this stage that Christensen he's just got to try and maintain it as best she can to the finish.
The strain is showing there at the moment.
Yeah, and she's got to try and hope that she doesn't lose form completely because she lost two places in last year's Chicago Marathon over the last 10 miles or 8 miles of the race, and Martin passed her in that time. She's got to hope that Motta doesn't pick her off as well.
Same thing.
Well, so Jones is still looking very strong indeed.
Well, he's been running 5:03, 5:07 for his last 2 miles. We guess that Robles is running a little quicker, but not significantly quicker.
Well, if indeed that was the 22-mile mark that we saw back there, the gap was almost 2 minutes. So, in fact, that still gives Jones a fair bit of cushion with 4 miles to go. He's got to drop a long way.
30 seconds a mile, which is, unless Robles is going to run 4:40 for his last 4 miles, which is highly unlikely, then Jones is going to win this race. And we've got our fingers crossed that he can just maintain some form, because if he does, he's going to run the fastest time ever.
Well, he obviously had that set pattern for the race because he bounced to the lead very early and he's just maintained it.
I wonder how Simeon Keegan's feeling right now, because he went with him for about 7 or 8 miles.
It hasn't been sighted since.
Well, I'd say he probably knows what a world record pace feels like, that's for sure.
Jarman's proving that Hiroshima was no fluke and the Olympic Games no fluke. He's certainly in it. So it's 1:57's the gap between Jarman and also Jones, but it virtually works out to the same 2 minutes, which is 30 seconds a mile.
1:50.41 there we saw. That was probably 23 miles. So Jones is still under 5:10 mile pace. That was about 5:09 that last mile. Just going back to that Hiroshima race, though, Bruce, I think undoubtedly this is a fantastic single performance that we're seeing, but that's the other Djibouti runner, I think, running with Benoit there.
It wasn't Shemake, but it was the third runner from Djibouti. They've got 3 in this race and 3 in New York.
Looking at Hiroshima, it was just a fantastic race where we had perhaps not the top 4 or 5 runners in the world, but so many of the rest, and I think there was a huge pack of about 30 still in contention at the 30k mark, and the times and performances in that race, I think, made it the outstanding race, certainly for depth of the year.
So Jones ran 5:06 for his last mile, and Jarman is about a half a mile behind now. Well, can't see De Castella in that shot, and hopefully he's that figure way back. So let's hope that Rob is continuing and can hang on, because he's still going to run a very fast time if he does.
Yeah.
Well, that prediction, Bruce, after the race in London of Steve Jones, it looked as though he was spot on with that prediction of that record of 2:08.05 for the Chicago Marathon going.
Well, he's right on with a chance, and we'll take a break as we're on Lakeshore Drive. I hope that photographer gets out the way. What an idiot he is, standing in the way of a great man like this.
I'll just add a comment. I think, on my calculations, if Jones runs 5:10 miles to the finish, he's got to just miss the world best at this stage.
So we'll come back to follow the fortunes of Steve Jones and also Robles Jarman and Joan Benoit, who's lead started. Bruce, we posed the question, could the two best times be bettered in the men's and women's? And the way this is going at the moment, we're in for a great finish to this Chicago Marathon of 85.
Well, this is the critical part for Jones. As Lenny said just before the break, that if he continues to run at the pace he is, he's going to be almost spot on what Lopez ran earlier this year in Rotterdam. Benoit, on the other hand, we haven't had a split for a little while, but she's around about the 2:21. Now, there's still a half a mile between Robley, who's in second placing, and Jones, who's leading. So it means two things. One, they're running at the same pace, so Robley obviously can't beat Jones at this stage. And,
No, not at this stage.
And Benoit, who's always been inside the world record pace. Now we're about to get Benoit's projected time. It's around 2:20.25, so it's still well inside. Well, not well inside, but it's still 40 seconds inside the world record.
Comfortable margin, but of course she's got 25 minutes of running to go yet, so just over 4 miles.
Do you think it will help her now, knowing that Christensen's gone, and the fact that she's got the race won if she can maintain this?
Oh, sure. I think mentally this is probably what she's wanted the whole race, to just be out on her own, running to the line.
And what about Jones's situation? And he's obviously hurting like hell after that early pace, and he's gone through 24 miles. He's getting within
1:55.42. It's really going to be touch and go, I think, and I think it could even depend on how conscious he is of how close he is to the record, how much. He's obviously getting a lot of encouragement from the crowd there, and that last mile I got approximately at 5:05, so that gives him a bit of a cushion on those 5:10s that he had to run. So it's going to be touch and go.
If it gets to an absolute desperate situation, he's probably capable of running his last half mile reasonably quickly, isn't he?
I think so. He still looks pretty strong. He's tired, but he's not losing form by any means, and it's just going to be an amazing run, I think. I mean, it's an amazing run no matter what he runs now, because just to have gone out and run that first half so quickly in such a race against such a strong field, it's just unbelievable.
And what he and Benoit have really done, they've split up a field that had tremendous depth, and we're going to see a lot of stragglers coming in among the good runners, a lot of do-not-finishers, I think, in this race. De Castella, we're hoping he's continuing. He's never not finished a marathon. I'm sure he won't in this case, but Rob's got to try and hang on now to run under 2:10, I would think.
Yeah. Interestingly, in his pre-race interview, he said that he didn't think he was yet in the shape that he was in 1980, 1981 and 1983 through that period. He felt he was getting back to it.
And his final time will indicate that he was probably right.
I suppose one thing that is in Jones's favour...
There's Alberto Salazar in the sidecar that just went past Joan Benoit, by the way.
I suppose in that battle for Lopez's time, the fact that this is a flat course is one thing that is in Steve Jones' favour, though, as he approaches this final stage of the race.
He hasn't got a big hill to get up, that's for sure.
No, there's a couple of little flyovers in the park, I think, where they just go over small rises. And interestingly enough, there's one theory that suggests that can be an advantage to runners, because you just change the muscle groups that are called into play to do the work ever so slightly, and that acts as a bit of that has a beneficial effect on your legs.
The other thing too, rankings are all important in athletic terms, and there's no doubt Lopez was going to be the #1 ranked marathoner this year before this race with his 2:7.12 in Rotterdam. Things might change after this with Jones's 2:8.16 and also a very fast run here as we see Lakeshore Drive.
I think it would be very hard to take the #1 ranking away from Steve Jones for the second year in a row if he... sorry, of course, #2 last year. It was a mental block, but it'd be very hard to take the #1 ranking for this year away from him.
He's won the two biggest commercial races now. New York's with London, then Chicago, but in terms of strength of field, probably this year London and Chicago a little stronger.
Well, there's Alberto Salazar there in picture.
He's feeling a lot more comfortable than he has in most of his last few marathons, I'd say.
He must be... This is the guy that ran 2:8.13 on a short course in 1981. He must be scratching his head and thinking, what's this Jones fellow all about? This is in a different league again, going out at 2:3 pace.
That's right. I don't... Well, I mean, we just haven't seen a half that fast, an opening half of a marathon that fast.
And likewise in the women's race, we haven't seen one any quicker, I don't think. Christensen's was probably on a par in London.
Let's have a look at the exact splits on the women's race. Perhaps they weren't quite... Certainly that first 5 miles, they were a lot faster, and that makes it a pretty tough race. But certainly by the time they got to halfway, they weren't running a great deal faster than either of them have gone through before. But still, that first 5 or 6 miles was pretty tough.
So both Jones and Benoit have got both their respective races won, as long as nothing incredible happens to either of them. And we'll see just what's going to happen to Steve Jones in just a moment as we take a break and try and bring him in for his second world's best in the Chicago Marathon for the second year in succession.
He projected world record time, and we've just seen Len Jones go through the 25-mile mark. He's not far from home.
He's not far from home, and he slowed in that mile to about a 5:16 pace, so that record's still touch and go. He's so close to it, I just believe he could possibly have one last effort.
So if he can run the next mile in around 5:15, it's going to be a dash over the 385 yards, if you can call it a dash.
That's right.
It's been an absolutely remarkable performance, whether he breaks Lopez's world record or not, because the split difference is going to be... Well, there's 2:6:49, they're saying, so that's... gives him still a 23-second cushion, but the negative split's not negative.
I think I'll go out on a limb here, though, Bruce, and say that finishing time's calculated on the average for the whole race, not what he's running now. So
you can see how much he's hurting, but the fact that he went through in 61:46 and he's going to come home in 65-something, or maybe not quite 66, is going to be an enormous difference, something that we haven't seen before in the great fast races.
Yeah. I think, you know, this man's ready for any sort of race now. It's just a fantastic run. I think the record's almost immaterial when you see a bloke prepared to go out and run a major marathon in this manner. I just can't... I mean, we couldn't believe it when we saw it at the start, and we can't believe it now. He's just gone out and destroyed a world-class field, and he's run almost as fast as any man's ever run through the halfway point of a marathon. It's amazing.
Gee, Lenny, he's really hurting at the moment. He didn't take a drink stop there. He's this is a little rise up the hill. You can see where he is on the map. If he just ran straight across that lake there, he'd be home, but he can't do it, unfortunately. He's just got to run around it.
Those photographers, they're unbelievable. They get so close.
Ridiculous. Unfortunately, they don't know exactly what it's like to run in a race like this, I'm sure, to get so close. It's just foolhardy and silly.
I wouldn't bet that Steve Jones couldn't run across that lake at the moment, Bruce, but I just think he'd be disqualified, that's all.
He could walk across it, I'm sure. But this really is a Superman. I mean, Lopez is a magnificent runner, and it's very hard to compare. We're just so lucky to see two marathoners that are so great in the same period. You know, Rob de Castella's an outstanding runner, a wonderful runner, but not even Rob at his absolute best could have done what Steve's done today.
I guess in a sense it's a pity that I mean the development of these big sponsored marathons has been a great thing, but can you imagine the sort of race we'd have had if they'd all been together in Hiroshima? Jones, Lopes, de Castella. What a great race. We had the best race ever for depth, and with all the top stars in it as well. What a great race that would have been.
Well, Jones, in fact, went through the 25-mile mark in 2 hours and 55 seconds, so that really is a superhuman effort.
So that made that mile 5:13 then, which
yeah,
makes it a little bit
couple
better.
Of seconds, so.
Which helps him in his quest to break Lopez's record.
I reckon we should all be willing him on from here. I mean, as I keep saying, I think we've seen one of the greatest marathons that anyone's ever run, regardless of what his finishing time is exactly going to be. And, well, if I believed I could do something to help him from here. Well,
Benoit's slowed. That's the first time she's been outside the world record projected finish, but what she's done today is just re-established again who the queen of distance marathon running is concerned with the women. She's really broken Christensen right up, and Mott has never really been in the hunt. So Jones, who's probably looked across there and can almost see where the finish is, and he's got less than... let's hope he's got less than 2 minutes to run.
Well, he's just about to swing into Lincoln Park, actually, and that's the where the finishing line is.
So here's a guy who, Dave, in the 3 races that he's finished, he's run the 2 races that he's finished so far, he's run 2:8:05 and 2:8:16. He's won this race and also London. He knows what the big time's like. He's running the Olympic final of the 10,000. that incredible 10,000-metre final in Helsinki. He wasn't part of the action in the last little bit, but he was in that final.
So Joan Benoit as well, her best time of 2:22.43, which was set in Boston in '83, one of her 2 wins in that marathon. The Los Angeles Olympic champion, 13 marathons. This will be her 8th win. And she hasn't lost a marathon since 1981.
Jones is definitely picking up his pace now. I think he knows how close he is to the finish. This is one last effort.
So the
And
time...
if he's judged it right, he could just about be under Lopez's time.
So the time we're looking at is 2:07.12. Let's hope that Steve Jones has got less than 50 seconds to run. I can remember last year we had a good long look at the finish. It's a long straight they ran up. So Jones has got to try and dig in and find something. So we're going to try and do what happened last year and get him in under 2:08.05 as he did last year for the world record. But I'd say, looking at where he is and looking at the finish line, he might have some problems going in under 2:07.12. It's hard to tell.
Yep. Well, as I keep saying, let's not dwell on the record too much. This has been a fantastic run.
He really is starting to pick up that pace, though.
He's sprinting for the line.
He is sprinting for the line.
He's got 20 seconds. He's got to get home in less than 20 seconds. Jones, who ran his first half of this race in 61.46, split the best field up for the year, maybe Hiroshima you can argue with, but has destroyed the best field of the year. He looks like he's going to just miss the world record. We can't see where the finish is. This is touch and go. Have a look at this. I think he's either equalled or broken it. I think he's equalled it. 2:07.11 or 2:07.12. And look at the Superman. What a man, what an athlete. 2:07.11. If we round it off to 2:07.12, then we have joint world record holders, Lopez and Jones.
Lope's time was 2:07.11 across the line, but it was later. Many of the digital clocks, of course, they don't show the splits, and the rules are that the time must be rounded up to the next highest second. So,
I think we've probably seen the world record equal.
We've seen one of the greatest races of all time. I think we've at least seen the world record equal. And really, Steve Jones, what a run. What can you say?
And what a performance over the last half a mile of that race, the way he could dig in and sprint. Now, Jarman's coming in. Now, he's going to be around 2:08. His best is 2:08.26. So Rob Jarman's going to be under that. He's going to run about 2:08.5, I think, or 2:08.6. They're about to get his... I hope they get him over the line. No, they missed him. That's ridiculous. That's bad luck. I don't know who's directing over there, but it would have been nice to see what he ran.
I would have been quite pleased to see what he's run, but he's run a PB, and I reckon he's dipped under 2:08.
We'll find out in a moment, because we are in contact with Chicago, but we'd guess he's run about 2:08.05. Now, Benoit's still about 14 or 15 minutes away, so I hope we can get De Castella coming in and some of the other male runners as well.
Benoit was just outside the world record pace for the first time, the last split they gave, but she was well under her own personal best of 2:22.43, which was set in Boston in 1983, and probably regardless of there's Rob finishing 2:08.51. That's not a bad run.
That's like 33 seconds.
Well, I can tell you that Rob Lay, in running, if he's run 2:08.05, that's the fastest second placing of all time. And De Castella's 2:08.51 is not... Well, it's 25 seconds off the fastest third placing of all time, so it shows what a quality run it is. Now, in comparison with his other great runs, 2:08.18 and 2:08.37. So it's, what, the third fastest he's ever run?
Yes, I think so, yes.
It's faster than he ran in the Commonwealth Games. He ran 2:09.18 there. His fastest was 2:08.18 in Fukuoka, 2:08.37 in Rotterdam, so that's De Castella's third fastest ever. Well, we've just been told that we're almost certain Jones has been given 2:07.12, which means that Lopez and Jones are the equal world record holders in a sensational year for marathons.
What a year, yeah. I think, too, with the Lopez time, there was some controversy over the course, which was thought to... Well, hadn't been verified, but I did see a newspaper story in the lead up to this race that said the course had been verified by independent measurers and had been found to be 20 yards long. The ruling now is that courses have to be at least the marathon distance, so if that's correct, then that removes any doubt over Lope's course.
Well, Joan Benoit has gone through the 24-mile mark at 2:09.29. This has been a great race from Joan Benoit as well.
Well, what a sensational race all up. 2:07.12 for Jones, equalled the world record, went through in 61.46. Robley, we're guessing at 2:8:05. It'll be around that. And De Castella at 2:8:52, 2:8:51. You know, Rob's got to be absolutely delighted. I know he hasn't won, but he certainly has run.
He's run very,
a great
very
race.
well, and I think the year that he's had, it should give him a bit of confidence looking forward towards the Commonwealth Games.
Well, 84 was a disappointing year for him, wasn't he? Wasn't it?
Disappointing in the fact that he didn't win the Olympic Games because he went in as a favourite, which is always a tough thing to do. And I think by his own incredibly high standards, disappointing. But here we've seen him under 2:9 again, which is great. I think he might hope that Jones runs the European and not the Commonwealth Games.
He's a pretty competitive animal.
I know he is.
I think he'd like to have another crack at Jones. I guess you'd have to question whether he runs Chicago again next year if he runs the Commonwealth Games in July. It might be a bit close.
I'm just thinking, Len, that if Lopez does run next year and runs in the European Championship and Jones runs in the European Championship and they don't clash between now and then...
What a race that should be.
Well, you can have all your promoted races in the world, but that's the one that would be the big one of the year.
Yep. And there could be another bloke named Charlie Spedding in that race, of course, and John Tracy even, if Tracy, the Olympic silver medalist, concentrating on running very few marathons, keeping them even less than people like Jones. So, yeah, I think we're looking at some very, very good marathons coming up.
What we're trying to do at the moment is find out some of the other place getters from the men's race. We've got the first three over the line. Repeating, Jones has equalled the world record at 2:7:12.
It does no good when you let it go in front of us. No good at all. Speed up, speed up. Right there, man, right there.
Well, apparently Jones told some reporters after the race, we've just had contact from Chicago, that he wasn't disappointed not breaking the world record, but terribly pleased that he actually won the race, which is what he set out to do.
Dave, I reckon if someone had said to Jones before the race, you're going to run 2:7:12, he would have said, thanks, I'll take that.
I'll take that, yeah. I've just done some quick mental arithmetic on Joan Benoit. My mental arithmetic's becoming more and more suspect as the night wears on, but I have her getting to 26 miles at 2:20:29, which I think would have it just outside the... In fact, probably 20 or 30 seconds outside the record. So again, if she can pick up a bit from the crowd support, knowing the pace that she is running, she's still an outside possibility to get that world best.
What she's doing, of course, is running a big personal best. 2:22:43 is her best.
And a great competitive win.
And I think there's no doubt now that she is the best marathoner in the world in the women's ranks.
No doubt whatsoever.
I mean, Vates isn't here this week. She'll be next week in New York. But I mean, Greta's, as great as she's been, has never got down to this pace, 21:22 mark.
No, and probably nothing that she's done this year suggests that she will. She may run a personal best, but I don't think she'll run this fast.
Not only is Benoit's finishing time going to be interesting, I'm going to be fascinated with how Christensen finishes, where she finishes, and if she
whether
finishes.
Motta or perhaps Dora can come through and pick her up over the closing stages. But Benoit's run has had one factor, of course, it was missing in all of her other marathons. It's been a very, very competitive run, and that's a lot. That's a very significant factor. It's a great competitive run to beat your greatest rival, probably in a time that's a personal best for sure, and perhaps even a world best.
So as we watch the progress of Joan Benoit in the Chicago Marathon, just repeating that Steve Jones of Wales in 2:07:12 has equalled Carlos Lopez's record in a tremendous performance. And now we're watching with great interest the finishing time of Joan Benoit, 2 times winner of the Boston Marathon, the Los Angeles Olympic champion, 13 marathons, heading for her 8th win. An incredible performance. And what a performance it's been, Bruce.
Incredible, and Len seems to think that she's picked up, and looking at her now, she's looking fresh. We think she might just miss the world record, but it's going to be a huge American record, and it's not going to be very far outside.
No, I'm trying to work out splits in my mind for the last 385 yards, but I've got to get into the 26-mile mark in about 2:20:10. So I think that would not give her enough cushion over that 385 yards to break the world best. But it's going to be very close, and fantastic run, as we've said.
We've also got to remember that there's a huge difference between Christensen's best time and the next best time ever run, which was Benoit. It was a minute and 3/4, which is an enormous difference at 2:21:06 compared with 2:22:43. So Benoit's been able to take some time off. have a bit of a break mentally, I think, after the Olympic Games. Get herself right again and come back and run even faster than ever.
Well, there's one of the two lagoons, which suggests that she's not all that far away from Lincoln Park, the finishing post of the 1985 Chicago Marathon.
It's an interesting line in support of not running marathons as frequently as people have run them in the past. Benoit's run 1983 Boston, the 1984 Olympic trial because she had to, 1984 Olympics, and now 1985 Chicago. We've just heard down the line that she's running 2:21:27 pace, so that would put it just outside the record.
Talking about backing up with marathons, what about that performance of Veronique Marot of Great Britain this year?
In London, yeah.
In London.
She ran one a week after the World Cup. Well, if Ron Tabb runs in New York next week, which he says he's going to, that's going to be 3 weeks after the Big M.
Yeah.
But Benoit, projected time, 2:21:27, which is 21 seconds outside Christensen's world record.
It takes well over a minute off her own previous best.
And 2:25 is still really the mark that most women are aiming at these days. Who have we had underneath that? We've only had Benoit and Christensen.
Benoit, Christensen.
Greta has.
And that's it. No, that's it.
Only 2 women have ever broken 2:25, so that just shows you what a remarkable run this has been.
Benoit's winning time in the Los Angeles Olympics last year was, at that stage, the 4th fastest time ever run by a woman.
When you consider her record, Bruce, out of the 7 wins she's had, this, in fact, will be the 4th on American soil.
And also the fact that she hasn't been beaten since 1981. She's really established herself as the world's top runner. There was a feeling earlier on in her career that she wasn't quite as good as Greta in the big occasion, but that's certainly not the case. She didn't run in Helsinki, of course, which was a strange decision at the time because she'd broken the world record earlier that year, but looking back, it might have been the wisest thing she'd ever done.
Well, it certainly probably set her up for the Olympic victory. She's always had a lot of trouble with her Achilles tendon. She's had operations on them in the past, and there's talk that she may require more surgery in the near future. But so perhaps it was a wise decision in those terms, that it preserved her legs for another year.
Well, the hopes of 2:20 have disappeared, Bruce.
Yeah, 2:20's disappeared, but you know, we call Jones a Superman. Well, I think this is a superwoman. We're at 2:20 right now, as Len's watch goes off next to me. And she's not too far away from it. And like Jones, I'm sure she's going to raise an extra effort over the last 385 yards.
I reckon. Again, it's just an amazing run. The competitive element of it's been absolutely fantastic. She had Christensen at her shoulder for, well, almost 20 miles of the race, then put in a decisive break. She must have been aware Christensen was chasing hard again and almost closed it down, so the temptation must have been to ease back again. But then she just kept pushing all the way through to the line, and this is a great run.
Well, the mark we're looking at is 2:21:06, which is the time Ingrid Christensen set in London this year. The fastest ever time for a female marathoner. But what a great performance by Joan Benoit of the United States.
Yes, Dave, not the fastest ever run, but just about the greatest marathon ever run. I mean, her performance in Los Angeles was thrilling in warm conditions. And here in Chicago, where the weather's been much kinder, we're seeing the #1 runner in the world who has now missed the world record, but I don't think that's all that significant. It's going to be an enormous personal best, a huge American record, and she's finished very strongly because she's going to be inside that projected time, and she's taken a lot off that 21:27, so 21:20. So Benoit, in a spectacular victory, maintains her superiority over her Ingrid Christensen. 2:21:20. Looks back to see if Ingrid's coming. Nobody there.
It's the first time she's looked back to, I think.
And sees them straight under the eyes. And
interestingly, like Rosa Motta last year, in the last few miles there, she was running away from the men that she had been running with. So it just shows she had the strength to finish on at that pace.
Len, being a previous marathon runner, what's the feeling like there in the legs as soon as they pass that 42K mark and you stop running after 2 hours?
Well, first you just want to stop, then you want to keep on moving. And actually you often find that if you're not feeling distressed, the ministrations of people just past the finishing line can be as much of a hindrance, although you appreciate that they're well meant. But you just like to keep your legs moving a little bit Very few people go as far as to take a warm down after a marathon, I must say, but you just like to keep your legs moving a little bit so they don't seize up.
So the city of Chicago, Bruce, will be long remembered in 1985 for two of the superhuman performances of Steve Jones of Wales and the American girl Joan Benoit.
Well, I suppose you can't call it good luck all the time, but Bob Bright, who's the race director, really has got the hottest race in the world. There's no question. We had an amazing performance by Jones last year, and today, you know, is this Christensen coming in?
I believe it is.
Yes,
yeah.
so Ingrid's hung on very, very well. She's around 2:22. She might break no, she might just miss out on 2:20, going under 2:23. So she's really hung on very well. We're looking at 2:23, 2:23.03, which is in fact her second fastest ever. It's well inside the time that she ran in London when she ran the European record back in 1984. So at 2:23.03, that's her second fastest ever, and would that be the fourth fastest ever run, with Benoit having run two faster and herself one faster? I think it would be.
Bruce, you're testing me on the figures, but I'll say you're right, yeah.
So here we have...
At this hour,
and look at Rosa Motta. Well, Motta's run 2:20...
She's 3.5 minutes almost. Sorry, 2.5 minutes off her best last year.
She's absolutely thrilled about that. So she's run 2:23.30. So, David, what we're going to see here is a succession, I think, of huge personal bests. And Christensen must have known that Motta was closing. I mean, there wasn't a lot in it at the end. Motta must have been able to see Christensen.
Yep, yep.
Well, that's incredible. Something around about 8 minutes off Rosa Motta's first ever marathon winning time, and that's only, what, in 2 years?
That was her first ever in Chicago. She had won the European back in 1982 on a hot day in Athens in 2:36. So she's come down from winning a major championship 3 years ago in 2:36 to running 2:23. So, Dave, we might take a break and try and work out all these calculations and get the 1, 2, 3s officially, but...
Well, Lenny's struggling with that mental arithmetic at this hour of the night, so I think we'll take that break and let him just reassess his thoughts. We'll be back with the final stages of our coverage right after this break.